My name is Stephanie William, and I'm 42 years old and a teacher by profession, shaping young minds and guiding them with the power of knowledge. But in truth, I was skeptical about anything that couldn't be explained by logic or science. Faith was a foreign concept to me, a relic of tradition rather than a source of meaning. But that all changed one evening, a day I will never forget. That day I was a skeptic. By nightfall, I was a woman shattered and humbled by an encounter so profound that it shook the foundations of everything I thought I knew about life, death, and the existence of something greater. What I experienced that night was no dream, no mere hallucination. It was a journey into a realm beyond comprehension, where I witnessed a single prayer ignite a wave of light powerful enough to free 10,000 souls from darkness. If you're ready, I'll take you with me to that place where the impossible became undeniable. It was an ordinary evening, or at least that's what I thought. I had just finished grading a mountain of papers at my desk, my back aching from hours of sitting. The hum of the clock filled the silence, and the glow of the table lamp cast long shadows across the room. I glanced at my watch, 9:47 p.m. The roads would be quiet by now, and I was eager to get home. I remember stepping into my car and driving through the empty streets. The rain had started lightly, pattering on the windshield, but within minutes it turned into a relentless downpour. The wipers struggled against the torrent, blurring my vision. Suddenly, out of nowhere, headlights came speeding toward me, veering into my lane. I slammed the brakes, but it was too late. The impact was deafening, a mix of crunching metal, shattering glass, and my own scream swallowed by the chaos. My body jolted violently, and then silence. A strange, weightless silence. I felt myself slipping away, as if sinking into warm, endless water. Everything around me faded to black, and then, in an instant, I was somewhere else, a place I couldn't recognize, but would soon never forget. When I awoke, or at least what I could describe as awakening, I wasn't in my body anymore. I wasn't in the car or on the road. Instead, I found myself in an expanse of nothingness. The air was heavy and stifling, though I could not see it or touch it. It was as if I were suspended in a thick fog of emptiness, but it wasn't silent. No, it was far from silent. A low hum echoed all around me, growing louder and louder until it became a relentless cacophony of whispers. The voices, so many voices, layered on top of one another, each distinct but incomprehensible. They seemed to be crying out in anguish, pleading for mercy, for release, for hope. My heart pounded in my chest, if I still had a heart to pound. I reached out instinctively, but my hands grasped at nothing. I felt utterly powerless, weightless, and yet burdened by a crushing sense of despair. I tried to speak, but no sound came out. It was then that I noticed the faintest flicker of light in the distance. It was weak, like a dying ember, but it was there. Drawn to it, I began to move. Or perhaps I was being pulled. I couldn't tell the difference. With each passing second, the light grew brighter, and the whispers around me turned to cries, desperate and haunting. As I neared the source of the light, I realized it wasn't a single point, but a massive, pulsating barrier separating two worlds. On one side, where I stood, the darkness was suffocating, alive with sorrow and regret. On the other side, through the shimmering barrier, was a realm so radiant that it almost hurt to look at it. Warmth emanated from it, a feeling of peace and love that called out to me like a mother's embrace. But before I could cross, something stopped me. A shadowy figure emerged from the darkness, tall and imposing, with eyes that seemed to pierce through my soul. It wasn't a person, though it had a vaguely human shape. It was something else, something ancient and powerful. "Stephanie William," it said, its voice a deep rumble that reverberated through the void. "You do not belong there." Fear gripped me, but so did defiance. "Who are you?" I asked, surprised that I could finally speak. My voice sounded small, trembling, but it carried my question. I am a keeper of truth, it replied, and you must face yours before you can go further. The figure raised its hand, and the whispers around me intensified, transforming into screams. Shadows began to coalesce around us, forming vague shapes that sent chills down my spine. Faces, dozens of them, no, hundreds, emerged from the darkness. Some were familiar, faces from my past, people I had known and loved. Others were strangers, but their eyes were filled with pain, staring directly at me as if I were responsible for their suffering. You carry the weight of your choices, the keeper said. You must see what you have ignored, feel what you have caused. At that moment, the faces began to move, circling me like a vortex of despair. Memories I had long buried surfaced with brutal clarity. Arguments with my parents, the time I humiliated a student out of frustration, the coldness I had shown to those who had reached out to me for help. Each moment played out vividly before me, as real as the day they happened. I fell to my knees, overwhelmed by the sheer weight of it all. I didn't mean for this, I whispered, tears streaming down my face. I didn't know. Intent does not erase impact, the keeper replied coldly. You must understand this before you can proceed. The barrier of light shimmered behind the keeper, tantalizingly close yet impossibly out of reach. My mind raced with questions. Why was I here? Why couldn't I cross? And what was this darkness filled with such unbearable sorrow? But I wasn't ready for the answer, not yet. The keeper's words echoed in my mind. Intent does not erase impact. I wanted to argue, to plead my case, but deep down I knew the truth. I had ignored the small ways my actions had rippled outward, brushing aside the harm I'd caused as if it didn't matter. But here, in this strange in-between realm, nothing could be hidden. The shadows, the voices, the faces, they all bore the weight of my choices. As the vortex of faces continued to swirl around me, one of them suddenly broke free. It hovered in front of me, solidifying into a young boy I immediately recognized. He was one of my former students, a quiet, shy child who had struggled in my class. I remembered him because of the day he had failed a major test, and I had snapped at him in frustration. My words had been harsh, cutting. At the time, I hadn't thought much of it, but now, standing before me, his eyes brimmed with sorrow. "Why didn't you believe in me?" he asked, his voice trembling. I just needed someone to believe in me. Tears filled my eyes. I didn't mean to hurt you," I stammered. The boy didn't respond. He simply faded back into the vortex, leaving me with a gnawing ache in my chest. More faces broke free, one after another, each bringing their own questions, their own pain. A colleague I had undermined out of jealousy, a friend I had abandoned when she needed me most, a stranger I had judged harshly without knowing their story. The keeper stood silently, watching as the shadows continued to expose the truth I had spent a lifetime avoiding. "This is the weight you carry," it said finally. "But this is not the end of your journey." Before I could ask what it meant, the ground beneath me began to shift. The darkness thickened, pressing against me like a living thing. The vortex of faces faded, replaced by a vast, desolate landscape that stretched endlessly in every direction. The air was heavy, suffused with despair, and the whispers returned, more haunting than before. In the distance, I saw figures moving, aimless and lost. They were shadows of people, their forms distorted and flickering like broken reflections in a shattered mirror. Their cries filled the air, a symphony of anguish that pierced my soul. I could feel their suffering as if it were my own, and it was unbearable. "What is this place?" I whispered. "This is the realm of the lost," the keeper replied. "These are the souls trapped in darkness, unable to move forward because they are bound by their pain, their regrets, their unwillingness to forgive or be forgiven." I looked closer at the figures, and my heart sank. Among them, I saw faces I recognized, family members, friends, even strangers I had crossed paths with in life. Their eyes met mine, and I felt their silent accusations, their unspoken questions. "Why are they here?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Because they have not been freed," the keeper said, "and because neither have you." The words hit me like a blow. I thought I understood the weight of my actions, but this was something deeper, something far more profound. The keeper stepped closer, its shadow towering over me. "Do you see now why you are here?" it asked. I nodded, though my throat felt tight with emotion. "But what can I do? How can I help them? How can I help myself?" For a moment, the keeper said nothing. Then it gestured toward the barrier of light in the distance. "You will find your answers there," it said. "But first you must face one more truth." Before I could ask what it meant, the darkness around me shifted again. This time it wasn't the faces of others I saw. It was my own regrets, my own fears, my own failures. They loomed before me like towering shadows, each one a reflection of the person I had been. I fell to my knees, overwhelmed by the sheer weight of it all. "I can't do this," I whispered. "You can," the keeper said, its voice softer now. "And you must. For only by confronting the darkness within can you find the light that frees you and others." The words resonated deep within me, and for the first time I felt a flicker of hope. It was faint, like the ember I had seen before, but it was there. I took a deep breath and stood, my legs trembling but steady. As I turned toward the barrier of light, I felt the cries of the lost souls around me intensify, their anguish growing sharper and more desperate. But I also felt something else, a call to action, a pull toward something greater. "I will face whatever comes next," I said, my voice firm, "and I will find a way to help them." The keeper nodded, and the path to the light became clear. As I approached the barrier of light, the keeper dissolved into the darkness behind me, leaving me to face the next step of my journey alone. The closer I came to the shimmering radiance, the more the anguish and despair of the realm behind me began to fade. The cries of the lost souls grew quieter, though their weight still pressed on my heart like a distant echo. The light was warm and enveloping, like stepping into the embrace of someone who had been waiting for you your entire life. My feet, or whatever part of me now moved, seemed to cross a threshold, and suddenly I was no longer surrounded by darkness. The landscape had transformed into something indescribable. It wasn't a place in the physical sense, but it felt vast and infinite, with hues of gold, white, and soft blue shimmering like waves. The air, or whatever filled this space, was thick with a feeling of love so profound it brought me to tears. And then I saw him. At first, it was just a presence, overwhelming and undeniable. But as I stood there, trembling, the figure became clear. A being of light, radiant and magnificent, appeared before me. His face was both familiar and unfamiliar, as if it were a reflection of every person I had ever loved and every ounce of kindness I had ever witnessed. "Stephanie," he said, his voice resonating through every fiber of my being. It wasn't a voice I heard with my ears. It was something deeper, something that touched my soul directly. I fell to my knees, overcome with awe and unworthiness. "Who are you?" I managed to whisper. "I am the one who has been with you through every moment," he said. "The one who sees you fully, who knows your heart, and who loves you unconditionally." The words shattered something within me. All the walls I had built around myself, all the defenses I had created to avoid feeling vulnerable, came crumbling down. I felt exposed, yet safe. "But I've done so much wrong," I said, my voice shaking. "I've hurt people. I've ignored those in need. I don't deserve to be here." The being knelt before me, his gaze filled with a love so pure it was almost unbearable. "Stephanie, the weight of your actions is real, but so is the power of redemption. The darkness you carry does not define you. It is your choice to let it go. I hesitated, the struggle within me almost too much to bear. How can I let it go? How can I fix what I've done? The being extended his hand, and in that moment, I saw them, the 10,000 souls trapped in the darkness I had just left behind. They stood at the edge of the barrier, watching me with eyes filled with hope and longing. "You are not here by accident," he said. "Your journey was not meant to end in despair, but in freedom, for yourself and for others." I felt a surge of emotions I couldn't contain: guilt, hope, fear, and an overwhelming sense of responsibility. "But how?" I asked. "How can I free them?" "Pray," he said simply. The word struck me like a thunderclap. Pray? The concept was foreign to me, a skeptic who had never believed in anything beyond what I could see or touch. But here, in this place, in the presence of this being, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. "I don't know how," I admitted, tears streaming down my face. "You do," he replied. "It is not the words that matter, but the heart." With trembling hands, I clasped them together and closed my eyes. The souls on the other side of the barrier seemed to draw closer, their eyes fixed on me with a mix of desperation and faith. I opened my mouth, and the words came, not from my mind, but from a place deep within my soul. "Please," I began, my voice breaking, "please forgive me for the harm I've caused, and forgive them for their pain. Let the light of your love free them from the darkness that binds them. Let them find peace, hope, and joy." As I spoke, the light around me grew brighter, expanding outward like a wave. The barrier began to dissolve, and the souls stepped forward, their faces transformed. The anguish that had marked them faded, replaced by expressions of relief and gratitude. The being smiled, his radiance even more powerful now. "You see, Stephanie," he said, "a single prayer, when spoken from the heart, can move mountains. It can free the lost, heal the broken, and bring light to even the deepest darkness." I watched as the 10,000 souls were bathed in the light, their forms becoming brighter until they were indistinguishable from the radiance itself. They were free. The being turned back to me. "And now, Stephanie, you must decide. Will you return to the life you've known, or will you stay here?" The question hung in the air, heavy with meaning. I felt torn, the weight of my decision pressing down on me. The next thing I knew, I was gasping for air, my lungs burning as if I hadn't breathed in years. The world around me was starkly different, bright, harsh, and jarring compared to the serenity of the place I had just left. I blinked rapidly, trying to adjust, but my surroundings remained fuzzy at first. It was only when I felt the sterile, cool surface beneath my fingertips that I realized I wasn't alone. I was in a hospital bed. The beeping of machines, the soft murmur of voices, the scent of antiseptic, all of it hit me like a tidal wave, overwhelming and disorienting. But as the confusion cleared, I understood. Everything had changed. The memories of my time in that other realm surged back, vivid and unrelenting. I had seen it all, the darkness, the lost souls, and the overwhelming light. I had witnessed how a single prayer freed 10,000 souls from the abyss, and I had been chosen to carry that message back to the world. A nurse entered the room, her face filled with concern. "You're awake," she said gently. "You've been unconscious for hours. Do you remember what happened?" I opened my mouth to speak, but the words caught in my throat. How could I explain what I had just experienced? How could I articulate the profound transformation I had undergone? I started, but my voice faltered. "I don't know how to explain it, but I feel different." The nurse gave me a puzzled look, but she didn't press. She adjusted the machines around me and smiled, as if she had seen this kind of confusion before. But I knew nothing about me was the same. When she left the room, I was left alone with my thoughts. I stared at the ceiling, feeling a deep sense of peace, but also a nagging sense of responsibility. The beings of light, the 10,000 souls. I could still feel them, like a presence in my heart. I knew that I had to act, to honor the message I had received, and to carry it into the world. But how? How could I reconcile the person I was with the person I now knew I could become? How could I integrate this extraordinary revelation into the life I had lived? It wasn't easy. In the weeks that followed, I struggled with the tension between the life I had returned to and the calling I had received. I found myself questioning everything, my career, my relationships, even my own beliefs. I had always considered myself a rational person, grounded in logic and reason. But how could I deny the truth of what I had witnessed? My friends and family didn't understand. When I tried to talk to them about my experience, they brushed it off as a hallucination, a dream, or simply a byproduct of my near-death state. I couldn't blame them. How could I expect them to understand something so beyond the realm of what they knew? But there was one person who truly listened. It was my mother. She had always been a deeply spiritual woman, even when I had rejected that part of her teachings. I had always been skeptical, dismissive of her faith, and yet, in that moment, I felt her presence as a beacon of light. "I've had an experience," I told her one evening, my voice trembling. "Something that changed everything for me." She smiled softly, her eyes filled with understanding. "Tell me, my dear. I've been waiting for you to find your truth." As I shared my journey with her, the darkness, the light, the prayer that freed the souls, I could see her eyes fill with tears. But these were not tears of sadness or pity. These were tears of recognition, of knowing that I had found something profound, something real. And in that moment, I realized that I wasn't alone in my transformation. My mother had always known there was more to life than what we could see with our eyes. She had always believed in the power of prayer, in the healing light of the divine. As we sat together, her hand resting gently on mine, I felt a deep sense of connection, both to her and to something far greater than myself. It was as if the world had suddenly opened up, revealing a purpose that I had long been blind to. The weeks turned into months, and as I adjusted to my new perspective, I began to understand the full depth of the revelation I had received. It wasn't just about me. It was about all of us, about how each one of us is connected, how each prayer, each act of kindness, each moment of love has the power to heal, to transform, to lift us out of darkness. I began to share my story with others, not in a way that demanded belief, but in a way that invited curiosity and reflection. I spoke of the power of prayer, the light that could free even the most lost souls, and the importance of forgiveness and redemption. It wasn't easy. I faced doubt, skepticism, and even ridicule. But I also saw the seeds of hope being planted in others. People began to reach out to me, sharing their own stories of transformation, of healing, and of finding light in the darkest places. The world, it seemed, was ready for the message I had received, and I was ready to share it, even if it meant stepping into the unknown. As I walked this new path, I carried with me the lesson that had been burned into my soul, that the power of a single prayer, when spoken from a place of pure intention and love, can change everything. It can heal the broken, free the lost, and illuminate the way for those trapped in the darkness. My mission was clear: to be a vessel for that light, to help others find their way back to the love and peace that had transformed me. And though the road ahead was uncertain, I knew this: I was no longer afraid, because I had seen, with my own eyes, the profound power of redemption. I had witnessed how a single prayer could free 10,000 souls from darkness.